speak in English because we have quite a few English participants, as always, at Risk and Trends. It's a pleasure to be back at Risk and Trends. Wojtek and his panelists will walk you through the different election scenarios for this double election that we are facing in May and in October this year, and through the possible government coalitions which might emerge from those elections this year. I have burnt all my fingers and all my toes over the past 6 years trying to put numbers or probabilities on particular election results. So I will refrain from forecasting the elections in Poland this year. I want to give you an understanding of the shifting political landscape against which those two elections will be taking place in Poland, because it is pretty clear that 2019 will be a watershed year, not just for the current political setup in Poland, but I would dare say for Polish modern history after 1989. Now, why do I say that? Well, 2019 will be the 30th anniversary of the fall of communism and the institution of liberal democracy and capitalism in Poland. And this is much more in terms of meaning than just a rounded date that we'll be celebrating this year. 30 years is not the lifespan, but the activity span of one generation. 30 years is the time that we are productive as one generation. And as it happens, we are living in a country, in political, social, and economic terms, where the elites which have shaped Poland after 1989 are increasingly, slowly but steadily moving out of power. We are seeing that in boardrooms. We see plenty of extremely young, talented, energetic people, very often sitting on the board -1 level. People who are way more talented than people who are actually sitting in boardrooms, but they are increasingly also coming into executive positions in business. We're seeing that in politics with the emergence of a raft of new leaders. Hopefully, we'll see also more female leaders in Polish politics, and the older leaders slowly but steadily leaving the political scene because they no longer have the explanatory power and the interpretative power to actually guide large majorities. With that comes the end of Poland's post-transformation republic. What is called the Third Republic in Poland is slowly steadily coming to an end. The economic and social reforms and subsequent resentment against those reforms have driven Polish politics for the past 30 years. And you can look at PiS rule for the past 3 years as the ultimate populist recoil against how Poland has been reshaped and reorganized after 1989, an attempt to organize it differently in a pretty aggressive and radical way. Even assuming a defeat for PiS this autumn, it is my opinion there is no return to the Third Republic as we have seen it. This will not come back. That time period in Polish history is over. It has run out as a consensus on politics and on society and economics. And Poland is entering an uncharted territory with an equal number of associated risks and opportunities. And a new path for the country will have to be charted in the coming month and coming years, worked out under circumstances of very high social polarization and outright political warfare, which culminated in the assassination of Paweł Adamowicz in Gdańsk. So, what is the outset at which we are starting? Well, the PO-PiS duopoly is slowly coming to an end. The left is emerging. But what is more, I think, important is to understand the underlying dynamic. We are moving from a way of thinking about politics which was largely individualist, concentrated on personal success, enabling citizens and people to become rich, to become successful, to advance on the social ladder, towards a more communitarist idea of life. We are a country rich enough in order to think about how we want to organize the broader welfare of our citizens. And I'm afraid all the parties, even those which are very liberal these days, will have to move into more communitarian thinking in the coming months and years, or perish. We are seeing a new generation of political leaders waiting to take over in politics and in business. We are seeing no social classes, no traditional social classes like in France or Germany in the 60s that could anchor those traditional parties. And we are seeing social media that are amplifying public sentiment and rocking daily politics. So there is a quest for a new political majority underway. We are seeing PIS, which is plagued by scandals and fighting government fatigue after 3 years in power. We are seeing a PO which is bleeding voters to Wiosna and still lacking an energetic, fresh leader and lacking fresh ideas. We are seeing Biedroń, who is filling the void with a modern populist offer and entering the fray as a third party. We are seeing Nowoczesna being absorbed by PO finally, SLD probably also in its death throes, just the older leaders vying for places in the European Parliament, but the new structures, actually new activists moving away to Biedroń. And we are seeing PSL, which is one of the traditional parties which actually has succeeded to transform itself in terms of having a new leadership and new energy which could drive it forward and beyond that creek that all the traditional parties are facing. And we are seeing Donald Tusk gathering his forces and possibly mulling an entry into Polish politics back in 2020. As liberal values are gaining traction again, illiberal values will be surfacing also. We'll be seeing increasingly on the right fringes of PIS, probably a new right-wing party being established. What does all that mean? Well, it means that European elections will be a dry run for Wiosna, as we all know, that will be testing its political potential. The key question for the parliamentary election in autumn is how many parties will be running on its own against PIS. If too many parties run outside of the big coalition boat, aside from the big coalition and Wiosna, there is an increased chance that PIS will retain power and retain its majority. With both outcomes, be it a coalition for the opposition or for PIS, majorities will be very slim in Poland's next parliament, and government formation will be a very cumbersome exercise. You will probably not see a government being formed very fast in autumn this year. Thus, any resulting government arrangement will be unstable, and given the fact that 2020 will be a presidential, highly contested presidential election, we might actually see an attempt or a temptation by the ruling party to call an early election in 2020. For PIS, the chief challenge in government will be to retain power in the second term while being fully conscious of the fact that they will be losing ground steadily throughout the second term. For the non-PiS government, it will be about managing its own stability because that new government will be formed out of several parties, and Polish parties are not accustomed to operate along the Belgian model of many, many parties trying to cooperate for a full term. The rollback of PIS rule will be the key challenge. I'm always telling investors and people who are interested in political futures in Poland, don't think so much about the election and don't be satisfied with anybody who tells you, well, the opposition will win. The really important factor is how the transition from PIS rule back to a liberal democracy will be carried out. Whether it will be robust enough but thoughtful enough also not to strike or stroke social conflict. What does all that mean for business? Well, Poland enters a period of political instability, which will last into 2020. We are facing a year of political instability with upside risks, meaning uncertain probabilities, towards a more stable setup on the rise. So there are more positive news going along those risks for businesses than negative. But government formation will be difficult and will take time. Another PIS term, if it comes about, will not be as radical as the current one because there are actually no hopes for a constitutional majority, which is the condition for PIS to pull through the full radical overhaul of the Polish state. A victory for the opposition will bring immediate positive sentiment, but the rollback of changes that PIS has done to the judicial, legislative, and regulatory arena will take time and will be a very uncertain exercise. Well, one has to look also for possible disruptors and things that could change the course that I have sketched out. One disruption already happened. This is the assassination of Paweł Adamowicz. Hopefully there will be no more political violence in Poland, but it cannot be excluded. because the political and social situation is very tense and polarization is very high. Obviously, Tusk's return to Polish politics will be big news and bad news for Grzegorz Schetyna and for the prospects of PO to successfully lead an opposition coalition. But one should also be prepared for a possible fall of Mr. Kaczynski, given the weight of the tapes that have surfaced so far and possible charges which could be inevitable against the leader of the ruling party. And on the far end, but a risk that I would like you to keep in mind, especially political leaders, because economists know it very well, a recession in Poland is long, long overdue. This has to happen sometime and will have a huge impact on the way voters perceive politics and politicians themselves drive the political agenda. For me personally, the key question that I am looking at is how the opposition will attempt, if it wins the next election, how it will attempt to successfully dissolve all the social and political tension that has accumulated over the past 30 years and come to the surface over the past 3 years in Polish society and Polish public life. We desperately need a new democratic consensus on how to run public life in this country. And the pursuit of political conflict for the purpose of conflict itself is not a road towards a better future. I am hopeful looking at people, at the new generation of leaders who are entering Polish politics these days. I hope there will be more interesting people joining parties and joining the public debate. And I would like to end here and give some chance to the new political leaders to speak their minds, and I'm passing on to Wojtek, who will lead the panel. Thank you.